Have you ever felt so hungry that nothing else mattered? Everything else fades away and all you can think about is food? Well, imagine being so hungry that you're willing to break God's laws just to satisfy your cravings. It took all the courage this young prophet could muster to get himself to Bethel. And when he finally confronted the king, he wasted no time delivering his message. King doesn't seem to care, but something interesting happened. The young prophet was supposed to be taken to Shiloh the next day to be put to death. And while Elijah didn't directly order him to stay away, his actions implied that he wanted the young prophet to come with him instead. Now, why would he do that? Well, because Elijah knew that he could convince the king to spare the life of the young prophet. After Ahijah left the king, he met the young prophet by chance. He thought he was safe and sound. But little did he know, the lion was lurking nearby, waiting for its next meal. He made a clever argument, saying that killing such a young prophet would be a terrible mistake. Unfortunately, the feast wasn't free for the taking. The prophet needed to buy his meal, and he didn't have any money. But he wasn't about to let hunger get the best of him. So he decided to do something crazy, killed the very lion that was guarding his cave and brought its carcass to the villagers as payment for his food. Plus, he suggested that if God really wanted the young prophet dead, he wouldn't have sent Ajah to rescue him. They weren't going to accept a wild animal, no matter how fresh it was. But when an older prophet came with a different one that sounded spiritual, even comforting, he listened and strayed. But then the prophet played his last card, reminded them of the fearsome reputation of the lion, the terror of the wilderness, and how it had finally been slain. Well, how could the young prophet be blamed for the death of the older prophet? Let me explain. The hungry prophet wasn't wicked. He was simply tired, and he listened to the wrong voice at the wrong time. Instead, he had ventured out and broken his vow, an action that would ultimately cost both their lives. As Elijah shared this grim prediction, the young prophet realized the gravity of his actions. And remember, your calling is sacred. Guard it, test every voice, and trust the one who called you. We grow weary. We crave an easier path. We mistake charisma for truth or tradition for obedience. And no matter how convincing another voice may be, always return to what God has already told you. But friend, God's voice will never contradict his word. He understood that he had strayed from God's path, and now both of them were facing the consequences. When the prophet went back to his cave, he found Elijah resting, seemingly sleeping peacefully. But as Elijah regained consciousness, he uttered a prophecy. He declared that within 24 hours, the young prophet would experience the same fate as him, death. And guess what? It worked. The villagers agreed to accept the lion as payment. But Elijah didn't mention that his own rescue mission was part of God's plan as well. But it wasn't empty anymore. There was a body lying inside, and it was none other than Ahijah. As the prophet approached, Ahijah opened his eyes, looked at the prophet, and spoke. "Alas, alas," he said, "for I know now that I am about to die just as the Lord has spoken. I am surely held responsible for your death." And although he convinced the king to spare the young prophet's life, he didn't know that he was also signing his own death warrant. And instead of going back to tell the king that he should reconsider, the young prophet joined Achiah on his way home. He told him to hide in a cave near the road between Bethel and Jericho. It was an ideal spot, secluded but easily accessible, perfect for a little rest and recuperation. But Elijah didn't mention that it was also close to where a ferocious lion was waiting to pounce. He boldly proclaimed, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as you yourself know, there is no king over Israel." This was a real man-eater, a force of nature that had been terrifying travelers for quite some time. People were so scared of it that they avoided that road altogether, even though it was a major thoroughfare. To them, it was a death zone. As the Lord is now about to say to me, "Go back. I must tell the king himself." Then he delivered God's warning. And just as God had predicted, the king became furious. He was so hungry he could have devoured a whole ox, raw bones and all. Suddenly, the familiar aroma of roasting meat wafted through the air, and his mouth began to water. You might be wondering what kind of delicious scent could make someone break their religious vows, especially when there was a hungry lion prowling outside. Well, it was the smell of a nearby village feast. He ordered his guards to arrest the prophet and throw him into prison. That's exactly what happened to a prophet in today's passage. Let's take a look. It all started when a young prophet got a direct message from God. In fact, the prophet didn't just receive a message, he got the full package: a mission, a message, and clear instructions. God told him to go to Bethel, confront a wicked king, and deliver a serious warning. At the time, there was another prophet named Ahijah living in Samaria. He was older, more experienced, and most importantly, a man of God. Now, Ahijah wasn't a bad guy. He was actually quite respected in the community. But let me warn you, he wasn't perfect. In fact, he had a secret sin: disobedience. He had previously received a message from God, but he chose not to follow it. And this time, he was given another chance to get things right. No room for sugarcoating or diplomacy here. The king had been warned not to sacrifice to anyone other than the true God, yet he kept on doing it. So the prophet was ordered to confront him during one of these sacrifices. You might be thinking, wow, that's a tough assignment. And you'd be right. But the prophet wasn't alone in his struggle. So when Ahijah heard that the king was planning to kill the young prophet, he went straight to the king and warned him to let the young prophet go. Now it's important to understand why this was a big deal. And as they walked along, Ahijah continued to build his case. Afterward, Ahijah made a suggestion to the young prophet. And let me tell you, this wasn't just any ordinary lion. Meanwhile, the young prophet arrived at the cave and settled in, feeling pretty smug about outsmarting the king's soldiers. And before long, the prophet's stomach started rumbling, and the prophet couldn't resist. He broke his vow, bolted outside, and headed straight for the source of the deliciousness. To his surprise, the villagers didn't seem too thrilled about his offering. And after satisfying his hunger, the prophet headed back to his cave feeling pretty pleased with himself. But hold on a second, why? Because Elijah had chosen to disobey God's command to stay in the cave. The prophet had heard directly from God. He had a mission, a message, and clear instructions. And in the quiet that followed, a lion waited on the road. It's a sobering story, not of rebellion, but of distraction. It's not of pride, but of misplaced trust. God's message hadn't changed. But the prophet stopped testing what he heard against what God had already spoken, and sometimes we're tempted to do the same. This story is more than a warning, it's a whisper. Stay rooted, stay alert. Thank you for watching. If this message stirred your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more timeless truth from Scripture. Until next time, walk carefully and keep your ears tuned to the voice of the Lord.